Hello there, and welcome to the Get French Football News Preview Show. I'm Nathan Staples, and joining me this evening is Adam White. From the beast to the east to the hottest day of the year in 3 weeks. Sometimes you can't predict the future, and things can turn around very quickly, but we'll try our best to predict the future tonight. But before all of that, here are your latest headlines. Paris Saint-Germain booked their place in the Coupe de France final, but not without a few road bumps in the way to the Stade de France. Kylian Mbappe gave them the lead, but Ismail Diomande gave to Caen go in at half-time level, and it took a double in the last 10 minutes with Diomande seeing red in between to get the newly crowned Ligue champions over the line and into the final. They will face Les Herbiers next month, who knocked out fellow national side Chambly 2-0 in the other semi-final. Will PSG increase their record by notching their 12th title in the competition, or will little Les Herbiers be the first third-tier side to ever win the Coupe de France? We shall see. All of that. Oh, that's everything for now. But for all your latest in the world of French football, head on over to our website at www.getfootballnewsfrance.com and follow us on Twitter at GFFN. We start this evening with those Coupe de France games, and both were interesting semi-finals, but we'll start with the Ligue 1 clash first between Caen and Paris Saint-Germain. And Adam, obviously the last competitive Ligue 1 game ended for them last weekend as they sealed the title against Monaco. But with this still being an important game for long spells of it, Caen gave as much as they were given, really.
Yeah, definitely. It was a good game. I think you're absolutely right that Caen were definitely more involved, had more effect on the game than perhaps I thought they would after that Monaco game at the weekend. Which, to be honest, in that Monaco example, I guess Monaco pretty off form to the point where the club has said they've reimbursed fans for the trip. They were so bad. So I mean that's maybe a bit of an exception, but Caen were definitely very much in this game. I think there are a couple of caveats to that. First of all, De Silva was brilliant defensively. He was everywhere for the first hour, 70 minutes or so, and they got a bit lucky with that first VAR decision when Di Maria, I think, was given offside, which De Silva actually made the mistake for. But I think that I think I think Garon said it was one of the most important games he'd ever sort of presided over as manager, and they played like it. And the pitch was a bit heavy after the game at the weekend with Toulouse just called off because of the adverse weather conditions. Surprisingly left Julien Ferry out, which is a bit of a surprise. Perhaps now he's 35, with Diomande, who played quite well. He ended up getting sent off. He scored the goal and did all right. Steph Peters as well in there. Maybe just wanted to sort of a younger, fitter midfield to sort of try and keep up with PSG. Ivan Santini did a little bit disappointed, went off at half time, perhaps injured. And I think that's kind of where they fell down overall. I mean, the goal was pretty fortunate from Diamande's point of view, deflected in. But they kind of lacked a threat. And Santini, I think, is one of the sort of the dark spots on Caen's season. I think previously he was very, very important to them. He would anything in the air, he'd head it into the goal. Last season in particular, but this year he's been a little bit, isolated, a little bit out of form, and has really suffered from this poor run they've been on. But credit to them, they really were in the game, and for long stretches you felt like I felt for long periods of the second half it was going to extra time. So perhaps 3-1 flatters PSG a little bit. Perhaps they did deserve to take extra time, but a good performance from Caen, and they can, take heart for that going into the final few games of the season because they're not entirely safe yet.
Yeah, it was an interesting game, really. I know Paris Saint-Germain obviously had their chances, and the goal that was overturned from VAR really helped keep Caen in the game for a long period. But it just felt like at any moment, especially with Kevin Trapp in goal, I'm afraid that Caen were taking pot shots from areas because they know he was liable. I mean, the Diomande goal it's a bit of a question mark on the German, isn't it? I mean, it does take that heavy deflection off of Rabiot, but it also is still got 20 yards to travel before it reaches the German, and he does get a hand to it, and a comfortable hand, and it still goes in the goal. So they were really just trying to test him from every single angle they could find, at least anyway, to try and see if they could sneak past. But credit to them for really going for this one, because they are obviously still, and we'll mention it later, they aren't absolutely safe, and they're slowly getting dragged further and further back into it. But Diomande's red card was a bit disappointing. Like you say, De Silva was good, but did make that mistake that luckily was really chalked off. But PSG weren't quite at their free-flowing best. I thought Di Maria was good again as well, but he's been really good this season since Neymar's injury, really. But they've not didn't quite hit fifth gear. But at the same time, they didn't really have to, unfortunately. Couldn't quite match their prowess. But the other game was really interesting, obviously, because it was a third-tier side versus third-tier side, as Les Herbiers hosted Chambly in this Coupe de France semi-final that one of them gets the sort of lottery ticket of facing Paris Saint-Germain, and it ended up being the home side Les Herbiers who scored 2 goals and again were assisted by VAR in this one. Their second goal was originally given an offside but correctly overturned. But they were really under pressure by Chambly in the second half. They were 1-0 up early on and a good goal, and they'd earned that strike. And then Chambly hit the post, had a couple of chances. There was a free kick that looked like for the world from the TV cameras. It had flown into the top corner, but it just gone into the side netting. They were pressing. It was all action. And then the second goal really killed the tie off. But more to that, Adam, really, it's a great story and great to hear them get to the final. It's going to be a monumental task, really, for them to take on Paris Saint-Germain and possibly beat them. But these are the things that many of these players would have really dreamed of and thought would never, ever happen. And that's the most important thing in this kind of scenario.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it says a lot about French football, I think, as well. The fact that there are 2 national sides in the last 4. It says a lot about. I think that I suppose there is a caveat to that, in that the French have a slightly different sort of perception of well, at least as far as I understand, of the sort of the magic of the cup that we would call, what we would see as a cup upset, and some, lower ranked teams doing really well, and we say, aren't the lower league strong? I think in France perhaps they say, aren't our top division sides not very good, which is a bit of a shame, because I think that there is some real strength and depth in the lower reaches of French football, and the Coupe de France is a huge sort of advert for that. Even I know that Les Herbiers and Chambly got to the semis, but you look further back in the tournament, and a number of sides from third and fourth divisions, which are sort of grouped out after the National, so the fourth division down. It isn't like in England with fifth with 5 or 6 sort of national leagues. So there's quite a big range there, and a lot of those sides, whether they have to be top of those leagues or anything, they often push on. And perhaps SC Still from the 8th tier playing Troyes in earlier on in around sort of January time was perhaps the biggest example, that even right down there, which I think I worked out, there are sort of 200 teams between them. It's mental how big the gap is. It's crazy. So I think it's a huge effort for French football, and shows that there is quality right down in the lower reaches. And let's hope I know that it's a bit of a long shot. You're right. A lottery ticket is the right word for it. But they're in the final. They've got absolutely nothing to lose. They've been brilliant to get this far. And PSG, although they've won the last 3 Coupe de France's, they only beat Auxerre, I think it was 1-0 a few years ago. Only beat Angers 1-0. Lower, sides that would have been obviously not as big of an upset, but there would have been upsets, and quite substantial ones. So I think that if they can get to half time still in touch, maybe only 1-0 down, or maybe 0-0, if they can keep it in range, you never know. And it's going to be great fun to watch. I just hope that if PSG can beat Monaco 9-0, effectively the second best team in the league, imagine what they could do on their day to a third division team. And I hope it doesn't get to that point, but it'd be great to see, and hopefully they can hold their own.
Yeah, because it's just thinking that even if they manage to grab a goal in that game, the stories they'll write, it's almost that underdog story. And it is great to see national sides doing so well, with the rumours that the French Football Federation are looking at doing a sort of a Ligue 3 in the near future, even maybe in 2020 when the new TV rights deal would do. That would be great for these clubs that do so well in the Coupe de France. I know some across the pond might see it more as their tops division being weak, but everyone in England always loves a good underdog story, and this is one of the best ones that you'll see across Europe this season, at least for a cup competition. But on to Ligue 1 matters this weekend, because there's a lot to go through, and a lot of games that matter both towards the top of the end of the table and towards the bottom, certainly. And we'll start with the fight for sort of 5th, 6th place, those 2 Europa League spots, should PSG obviously win the Coupe de France. Otherwise, it would be Les Herbiers in European competition, which wouldn't be too bad to see, at least anyway. But we'll focus on a Breton derby really on Friday night, which is what you like, but also two teams that are still battling out for those positions, even though Nantes have been on a terrible run, and Rennes have slowly crept up into that 5th place position. But an excellent, interesting game, and we'll start with Nantes, really, Adam, and they've been on a pretty awful run, really. To be fair, in 2018, it's not produced many wins at all. It's produced one in the Coupe de France. They beat Guingamp back in January. They beat Troyes back in March. No victories elsewhere. That's around, well, it's 13 rounds with 2 victories, and a couple of draws in there. There's the one against Dijon at the weekend. They drew to Metz as well in that run. They did draw to Marseille, which is a more credible one, but they've been on a real slide that's probably gone under the radar, given that their first half of the season, I'd admit, is their season, with the games coming up as well against Lyon after this and Montpellier, it's petering out, isn't it?
It does feel that way, and it's such a shame because they were fantastic in the first half of the year. I thought against sort of all odds, given that Ranieri didn't get the targets transfer-wise that he really wanted, and they sort of looked at a lot of players, and it was a bit of a disparate group that sort of came in the end. And Ranieri's had a very sort of up and down managerial career. Obviously brilliant at Leicester, but the Greece situation beforehand is a huge sort of, you have a caveat to that as well. So I really felt like it was going to go poorly after that loss to Lyon on the opening day, but they were brilliant up until Christmas. And I think they've been lucky in so much that the top of the table behind the top 4 is very, 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 very tight. And they stayed 5th for most of that run, despite not really picking up too many points, because it's kind of like nobody else really wanted to take 5th off them. And even now they're in 9th. They've dropped to 9th, but they're only 2 points off 5th. So a win here, if results go their way, which is obviously a bit unlikely given the amount of teams involved, but it could be 5th again. So hopefully this sort of poor run after Christmas will be a rather long, but a recoverable blip from Ranieri's team, because it'd be great to see Nantes back in Europe, talking about building a new stadium. They're one of the sort of grander, older clubs of French football, big in the 70s and 80s. And it'd be great to see them return to European competition, because Ranieri's done a brilliant job. And they, on their first half of the season performance, they deserve it. So hopefully they can recover in the final 5 games and they can make a challenge for one of those 5th or 6th. As you've said, 6 should be a Europa League place, because it'd be great to see them there. But it's just whether they can avert this slide and they can rediscover the form and the sort of the strength. And it's almost like they've lost the intensity that Ranieri provided at the beginning of the year. And it's not necessarily the quality, because it feels like they're still in games, but it's just sort of the gumption that got them over the line earlier in the year. A lot of very narrow wins: beat Troyes 1-0, beat Montpellier 1-0, beat Caen 1-0, beat Metz 1-0. And they've kind of just lost the edge in the last few months, which is really disappointing. And I think 5 games left. They're not easy games. You mentioned, Rennes, huge Breton derby. It's a massive game for the Europa League. Because it'd be great to, Rennes will be really, prioritising taking 5th, and they're a team in form as well. Lyon's a difficult game. Montpellier are very difficult to break down, coming to the Stade Bourgeois, in May. They'll be difficult. Angers away, perhaps nothing to play for. Strasbourg in the last day of the season. Maybe those last 2 might help them out, but those 3 games to come could be enough to end their challenge. And I hope that's not the case, because they won these narrow games early in the season and they've just fallen the wrong side of being able to sort of conjure that goal. Or Emiliano Sana's form's dropped off, and it's just sort of fallen away for them, which is a real shame. But there's still time.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing, really. Looking as well through their 2018, the 2 clean sheets they've kept in those 13 games are both in the victories, really. So the strength at the first half of the season was their defence and keeping other teams out and nicking games 1-0. That's not happening anymore. They are conceding, and because of that, they're not strong enough offensively, really, to sort of deviate against that. And they face a Rennes side that are again have a question mark above them. We mentioned a few weeks ago that unbeaten in 8 games before the weekend, at least anyway. A couple of good wins in there, a couple of interesting draws that were maybe a little bit unlucky, such as Saint-Etienne, who were on a roll. They probably should have beaten Monaco a couple of weeks ago. They probably should have also beaten Nice a few weeks before that. Then they have this anomaly that seems to always crop up for Rennes every single season, where they face a weak team, and in Metz, and we'll come on to them in a little bit as well, in fact, and they end up losing. It's almost like the classic Rennes story of really building your hopes up. And I feel sorry for Rich more than anyone. They seem to build everyone's hopes up just to wait to knock them down. But an opportunity for them to get back on the horse here and do some punishment to someone in and around the places, especially again with their fixtures left: Toulouse, Strasbourg, yes, Paris Saint-Germain, but they're probably on their holidays already, unless they're preparing for, preparing in quotation marks for the final at least, and Montpellier on the final day of the season. There's a great chance there that if they can pick up the baton again, and in a fiery Breton derby, you'd expect them to do that and win against Nantes. It's a great chance for them to really push their marker for 5th and a Europa League spot.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, winning this game would be huge for Rennes, given that Nantes are such massive rivals of theirs. 5 points the gap would be. They'd go a long way to damaging and even ending Nantes' hopes. And I think that although yes, last week was a bit of an aberration. Nolan Roux getting to 14 goals in the league season is an aberration in itself. But it was a game that Rennes shouldn't have lost, and they hadn't lost in their previous 8 either, winning 5 of those. So, there were, not many goals in their games, but they were finding a way to win, and they were the informed team. So I'm sort of hoping from their point of view that this defeat to Metz last week is a little bit of a blip and something they can overcome. Because like I said, first half they're completely dominant. They could have been 2, maybe 3 in the first half, and then they give away a silly goal, and then the second goal they give the ball away in midfield, and there's a counter attack, and then Metz defend for their lives for the remaining sort of 35 minutes. And Rennes, one of their main problems, as I said, there isn't too many goals in their game. They defend okay normally. That didn't work last week, but they don't score too many either. And although Wabby Kadri's been fantastic up front, he's not a finisher, so to speak. And Diafra Sakho is perhaps not done as well as they would have hoped. He's dropped out of the team in the last couple of weeks, and it's often the case for Ligue and sides, but their problem is goals. And hopefully, from their point of view, that they can get Sakho back in the team. I know Kadri's their top scorer, but hopefully he can keep contributing as well. And getting Johan Gorkov playing as well would be a huge plus for them. I'm not sure he's so injured. It's just such a shame to see him unable to play as much as he would have liked. But there are weapons there, so hopefully that they can rediscover the goal scoring form that they do theoretically possess, and I think that's going to be the main factor for them between now and the end of the year.
Yeah, and it's going to be a really fiery one. So let's get a prediction on this one. Adam, what do you think the score will be?
I'm going to go 2 each. It was a very good game in the first encounter, and 2-2.
Yeah, I think I'm going for 2-1 Rennes. I think Nantes' ship has probably sailed, even though they're still within a points difference. I think it maybe has just fallen away at the wrong time for them, with other teams like Saint-Etienne and Nice and Montpellier now above them, with good goal difference as well on them as well, a couple of goals each way for them. I just can't see Nantes clawing it back, and this might be a pretty bitter pill to swallow for them against a Rennes side that if they win at their ground, it's not going to be the most popular of choices. But on to the team that beat Rennes last week in Metz, who have a game against Caen this weekend, which is a crazy one, really. We were mentioning on Monday that we keep putting the nail in the coffin for Metz, and they keep pushing it back out again, just to teeter open the door of possible safety, really, Adam. It's crazy to think that they're still within a shot, but they have games ahead that don't look too difficult, and this is one of them, certainly, with a Caen side that are slipping, that have had a midweek game as well that was tough on them, having to obviously push themselves against the best team in the league, but at the same time, with the goals that they're getting from Nolan Roux, with the hope that they know that it's do or die for them, they have nothing to lose in a sense, because everyone already thinks they're relegated. Is this the start of the Great Escape?
Yeah, I think it is. I have a funny feeling about Metz going into this sort of final 5 games. You're right. We've talked about them so many times on the podcast and said that they were done. We've written them off a number of times, and they've kind of clung on and hung in there. And the win last week was huge. After the 5-0 defeat to Lyon, you thought that has to be it now. All right, they were sort of 8 points adrift, with 5 games to play, 6 games to play. But the manner of that defeat, the pie absolutely tore them apart at home. I know that Lyon are one of the better teams in the league, and they wouldn't have necessarily been expecting to take anything from that game. But the manner of the defeat would have really damaged their confidence. And to come back, to go to Rennes, also a side in form, hadn't lost in their previous 8, as we mentioned, to go there and win and come from behind as well shows huge amounts of character, and shows that they've got some quality in their team as well. It is odd that I'm including Nolan Roux in that quality, given his record, this being the first season he's broken double figures. But 14 league goals, I think that's more than Mbappe. I think he got 13. So
Yeah.
at least last weekend that was the case. So it's a huge opportunity for them because the gap's down to 4 points. And as you said, their final games at home to Con, who had a midweek game with PSG, an intense one like that, they'll be tired. Lille away from home, Lille without behind closed doors, that game we played after the Lille's ban. Angers at home, probably safe, mid-table. Probably don't care too much about that game. They'll be on the beach, could win there. Away at Amiens, similar situation, a beatable side. And at home to Bordeaux, who are on the last of the season, who again will be on the beach. They're in the sort of Europa League contention, but on the outskirts of it. Those are 5 winnable games. And with 4 points, the momentum gathered last week, they really could pull off the great escape. And I think that this is down to a sort of a subset of their team. I mean, you look at their team and it looks like a Ligue 2 side, apart from maybe 4 players who've really sort of held them together. Nolan Roux, obviously, as I mentioned. Mathieu de Sevy's been brilliant. He was great at Standard Liège. I know that our Belgian analyst at Football Radar was a big fan of his, and he's been brilliant consistently, even though we haven't been getting the results. Renaud Kerr has been an absolute warrior for them in midfield, consistently brilliant, captains so fantastically. And Moussa Niakhaté in defence has had a great season, very, very quietly, only 22, signed him in the summer. But he's with Bisevac out injured, who's a very experienced player. Essokotu out injured for a long time, also very experienced. He's really led that defence and assumed responsibility there. And he's been absolutely fantastic for them. So if those 4 players can maintain their form, Roux can keep scoring goals, Giuseppe can keep setting up, and Coad can keep dominating midfield as much as he can for a side of bottom of the league, then yeah, I think they're going to do it. I have a funny feeling that they're just going to get enough points. The sides above them, in a similar way to Nantes, have helped them out in that they haven't wanted to escape from them. Toulouse, and Leo have been arguably just as bad. And they're in with a shout, and they'll be more confident than those 3 sides given their form. So yeah, I think they're going to do it.
Yeah, it's starting to feel like the music's starting to rise. The moment is just starting to appeal to them, and they're really clawing it back, given that the faults of those above them. And against the Con side as well, we mentioned the games that are coming up ahead, but obviously you need to start building momentum, and this is one of the sides you really want to do it against. Really, they've lost their last 5 games in all competitions. Yes, one was postponed from last week. Obviously, the issue with the waterlogged pitch against Toulouse that kind of gives them an out still, at least if they can't get a result here. But they still have a relatively. This is just as an important game for them, really, because they've been on this terrible run that slowly brought them back into things with teams like Amiens climbing above them, really, and they've sort of slipped along with Strasbourg into possibly being in a fight for themselves. But they have this game against Metz, and if they don't win because the Metz are maybe just sniffing a chance of some kind of survival, then they've got Troyes, which seems much more winnable at the moment, which sounds a little bit strange. But at the same time, if they don't win that game, Adam, Monaco, Nice, Paris Saint-Germain to end the season. That's hellacious in the sights. Even though Paris Saint-Germain and Monaco might not have nothing to play for at the same time, they're not teams that are just going to allow someone like Con to just walk over them, essentially. But at the same time, that's a real gauntlet to run if they are, say Toulouse win at the weekend, say Metz beat them at the weekend, say maybe there's a point for Troyes or Lille, some of the results behind them start lifting up, they're going to be in real trouble.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think they'll be looking over their shoulders. Lost, as you said, terrible form. As you mentioned last week, beaten 3 by Amiens, Montpellier, and Angers in the last 3 league games. Maybe this cup fight, semi-final was distracting him a little bit. But if I was Patrice Garand, I'd be pretty worried about the form of his team, the lack of goals in his team, the form of Santini, as you mentioned earlier. Ronnie Odlan can't do it all by himself. Yeah, I fear for them, but I think there is also again this situation that there's sort of parallels with Nantes and Metz in that kind of stopped in their little race, in the league and race to the end of the year, but the problem is that everyone behind them has stopped as well, and they've sort of said, "Do you want to catch us up?" And they've been like, maybe not, and Troyes, Lille, Toulouse have been bad enough to leave that 6-point gap, and it's kind of stayed at sort of around 5-6 points for a number of weeks now, and we're getting those teams behind them are running out of games, and I think that might just, they might have timed their sort of poor run at the right time that it won't drag them into the bottom 3, but it's going to be close.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a case for a few teams, really, that they're maybe a little bit lucky that teams below them have continued to be awful. But let's get a prediction on this one. And I'm probably thinking you're thinking on the same lines, Adam. I really fancy Mets for this one. I think it'll be a 2-0 win for them. And maybe the momentum giver, especially with Saint-Etienne and we'll come on to and Lille at Marseille, especially. Those are really difficult games away from home for both of those teams. That's a chance for Mets to really make this super interesting. And what do you think, Adam?
Yeah, 2-1. I think Mets are going to take it.
It's going to be a really interesting one, especially with a couple of the team that's just above that sort of dotted line, although it's obviously the relegation playoff that Lille are currently occupying, is Toulouse, who take on Angers, who are, you would arguably say, probably roughly safe at 37 points, but another point or two will definitely make certain. But Toulouse having a week off doesn't really help, but may really help at the same time. It's a bit of an interesting one, really, Adam. Obviously, they were washed out in that game against Caen, so they didn't play last weekend. So they have that game in their back pocket at least. But at the same time, they need to start picking up wins because these teams are still very close to them and have winnable games against each other at least coming up that might drag them in if they don't start picking up results. But an interesting one against an Angers side that have been decent, but at the same time, maybe thinking they're just about safe. Do you think this is a chance for Toulouse to pick up a 3 points, and that would be really momentous in pulling possibly other teams back in and also pulling them away from those below them?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Angers have been good form recently. If you ignore the PSG defeat, then they've got some really good, useful points. Beat Caen, draws with Strasbourg, Nice, and Bordeaux, and I think they'll be feeling pretty much safe, especially after that draw with Nice last week. The game's not taking away an extra point. It kind of feels like, all right, they're only on 37 points, but they'll be thinking that they're safe. And for Toulouse, it's kind of a similar story with them. They're sort of in games and they've got good players. They've got the quality in Max Gradel and Andy Delors when he can get enough chances to score goals. I don't see him missing too many chances. He's just not really getting the service. But it just feels like, much like Nantes, they're sort of falling the wrong side of getting that. The crucial moment is going against them, and it's almost like it's just unfortunate at the moment. But the problem is that it's gone on too long. And you look back at their previous games, and the only real standout result is that 3-3 of Monaco, which they're very lucky to get back into. And 0-0 with Amiens away, draw with Metz, lost at home to Marseille, no disgrace there. But there are winnable games in there, and they just haven't been able to produce the points. And the crucial moment to finish off a move or to take a chance in very, very tight games. Fortunately for them, they've got some winnable games coming up. But as we talked about a number of times, it's if they survive, and I think they will, just about, maybe via the relegation playoff, if Lille can get their act together. It's what happens to them next year, because they could have a Arles Avion-esque season if they're not careful with the amount of loan players they've got, players who are likely to leave like Lafont, Diop, Delors completely out of form. And if they survive this year, then they're in for a huge summer in terms of recruitment, in terms of whether they can get some of these players back on loan, what manager they bring in, because I don't think Lebev will stay beyond this year, and whether they can perhaps promote some more youth players as they did before successfully under Depraz. But I just can't see that. I can't see where Toulouse survive, whether it's this year or next year. I think they're in trouble. I think this year they might be okay, but longer term, it looks pretty worrying for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And against an Angers side that have got 12 points from their last 7 games, that has pretty much seen them safe. They've got some interesting games, but it's starting to look difficult to see them really being pulled back. The same with Amiens, who we'll talk about in a moment. They just seem like they're just outside. So, and credit to them, like we've mentioned a few times, obviously the goals of Carl Toko Ekambi have helped an enormous amount, but the team just pulling in one direction and having that heart again under Moulin. I mean, even at the weekend against Nice, it looked like they'd lost that game as well, thanks to that Alisson player goal. But Angelo Fulgini pulls one out of the bag, and they almost nick it right near the end as well. It just gives them that little bit extra, really, at the moment. That's what's capitalised their last sort of 2 months or so. Is just they won't give in. Again, in the Strasbourg game, they obviously went ahead early, but were pegged back. But they were decent in that one, and the victory against Caen, which was absolutely enormous, that's made the big difference, really. And that looks like it again. And they'll be hoping in this kind of game very quickly that that they can nick 3 points really, and that 3 points will all but really, although it's not quite mathematically, pretty much guarantee safety.
Yeah, I think so. And they Stefan Moulin is a wily operator, and he won't let them sort of rest on their laurels anytime soon. So I think that's probably where they differ from Toulouse, in that Moulin is they gave him a new contract recently, and it seems to have engendered some confidence in the team, because I think he has the squad support, absolutely. So for them next season, they'll probably lose Toko Ekambi, who's been linked with, I saw him with Villarreal this week, and Brighton will come back in for him, I'd imagine. And they'll be in a similar position, but they've got a solid base, and one that they've built on sort of since they got promoted, really, and they've managed to sort of make the most of, if you like. So next season, again, I think that they'll be looking ahead to that a little bit more than Toulouse, but you back them to be fine this year pretty soon as well, to get to the 40-point mark. And with Moulin in charge, I think that the Ligue 1 days are hopefully pretty long.
Yeah, absolutely, and credit to him in what they've done this season. But that a win there would give them 40 points, and that will be 11 above the dotted line of at least full relegation, and that pretty much will see them safe. It would take a monumental collapse and a monumental rescue from someone to pull them back into the mire. Adam, what do you think the score will be in this one?
I'm gonna go 1 each.
Yeah, that sounds about right, especially for Angers at the moment, which kind of doesn't really do Toulouse in many favours, but it definitely maybe just pushes Angers over that dotted line to safety. And another team aiming for that elusive win that will pretty much guarantee safety is Amiens against Strasbourg, the sort of Ligue 2 match from last season, really. But for Amiens, Adam, this one, a victory will get them on 40 points as well, and 11 above the dotted line should other results go their way, and that would be a massive weight off their shoulders and a massive achievement. I think the question really isn't just the form that they've been on recently, which has been pretty terrific, that's pulled them away from the drop zone, but is the question now for them, given their resources and what we expected from them at the start of the season, where everyone was almost certain that they would go down, is Christophe Pélissier manager of the year?
Sorry. Yeah, I think he has to be. He's a very good coach. Has success stories. He's with Lerzenac, was one that sort of stands out, where he got them up to Ligue, a very small club, and financial issues kind of conspired against them to get relegated. And he's taken Amiens from what was a national team two years ago. Because you mentioned this was a Ligue 2 game last year. It was a national game 2 years ago. These were the top two in national and then Ligue 2 for the last 2 years. And sort of Amiens sort of followed Strasbourg up. And yeah, given the resources that he's got, the smallest budget in the league, a number of these players that have been sort of very prominent this year are effectively national players. Amiens, a team that have been down in that sort of area of French football for a number of years, and players like sort of Julien Ilelch, who's had his moments this season. You look at the defence in particular, Adenon and Debassi and El Hajam and players like that who've formed I think it's going to last weekend, it was the third best defence in the league, or joint third with Monaco, which is an unbelievable statistic when you think about it in terms of goals conceded. Given that most of it, apart from Prince Guano, who's coming from Victoria Guimaraes and done very well this year, catching the side as well on occasion. The fact he's drilled that defence to such a high standard really shows what a good coach he is as well. They made a lot of changes in some, a lot of players came in, but that base of Regis Gutner in goal as well has remained pretty solid over the last 3 years, and it's served them brilliantly. So Pélissier deserves huge credit, so does the team, and hopefully in a similar way to when Angers got promoted, and obviously they were a bit more sort of headline making with their early season run, but hopefully they can follow the way that Angers have maintained their Ligue 1 status for a side with a small budget too. Great manager, astute signings from more obscure places, really solid, good midfielders on the ball, the occasional goal from Moussa Konate. Hopefully they can keep Gael Couture, who's only on a loan from Hebei. Unfortunately, did try and sign him, but it was an issue with the contract. But yeah, Pélissier 100% man of the year, and an unbelievable job, really.
Yeah, really, really good. And like you mentioned, that defense at the moment, really, it's better than Monaco's. In fact,
Is it?
the only
Oh, I
teams that
suppose they
have.
got PSG. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. So that's not done back really. In fact,
No, exactly. Yeah.
thank you for PSG for helping Amiens look even better because it's only PSG at the top, then Montpellier on 29, Nantes on 36, and Amiens on 37. So they're not even far off Nantes, who had a really, really sturgid sort of first half of the season, especially. And credit to them. But again, they face a Strasbourg side that are again getting an opportunity. Really, I mean, we mention this almost every week at the moment, Adam. That every week Amiens seem to be facing a side that we feel like they can beat. There was Toulouse back in March, and they drew 2-2. Same with the derby against Metz, that was 2-2. They had Angers a couple of weeks ago. They drew 1-1. It was always going to be tough against Saint-Etienne, but they only lost that 1-0 in the last couple of moments, really, thanks to Mathieu Debuchy. But they were up against it really on that one. But at the same time, this is a massive game for them, given that if other teams start picking up points below them, and they are a little bit closer than Caen, they've got Nice, Rennes, Lyon, and Nantes to finish the season, which isn't the most exciting prospect. Although maybe that game at the end of the season, should Nantes be out of the firing line, that might be a chance for them to maybe nick a win. But at the same time, a win here will be massive for them, putting them on 37 points and joining Amiens really, and probably giving themselves some safety. But at the same time, a loss here, with the form that they've been in, I mean, they've not won since week 25 in February against Troyes. It puts them right in the mix of things, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does. I think it definitely would. And given the state of their squad, it's not the biggest of squads to start with. But you look at the start of the number of injuries that are piling up. You know, Terrier got injured a couple of weeks ago. Hulu's been really important for them in midfield this season. Injured, could miss a number of games. Kenny Lala's been brilliant for them. Missed the last three with injury. Mangano who's a very important centre back for them, although a bit old now, but still an important player for them. Injured for a long time. Da Costa's injured. Who they're probably the biggest goal threat, and it's just getting to the point where they're kind of scratching around a little bit, and it feels like that the quality that was keeping them afloat is slowly draining away a little bit. Although they've got some good results, acceptable results in the last few games. It's almost like they want to draw every game until the end of the season, and that'll be enough to keep them up. Which it would, to be fair, but it's getting to the point where it's if they can't pick up that win, and teams behind them in this final, mad dash, which often sort of develops into in the last 5 games, they start picking up points, and they're going to get sucked in like Con very, very quickly. And without those players that I mentioned, Lala, Hulu, Terrier, Da Costa, they're going to be, it wouldn't be beyond their own responsibility and drop into that relegation playoff spot.
Yeah, and I fear for Strasbourg still a little bit, at least anyway. It still depends on. We've waited about 5 or 6 weeks for teams to start catching others up, but it's not really quite happened just yet. But I think Amiens get the win here and sneak over the line with a 1-0 win and ensure an excellent season turns into a fabulous one, really. And what do you think, Adam?
Yeah, I'm going to go Amiens on 1-0 as well. The first game between these two teams wasn't many goals, but I can't try to remember. It was an open game at least. I remember watching it and thinking it was pretty end to end. But yeah, so hopefully a good one as well.
Yeah, let's hope so at least anyway, because they're both still fighting it out there to some degree. I'm sure Amiens will want to make it almost mathematically impossible for them to go down. That will make them feel that little bit better at least. On to another game finally on Sunday between sides that are facing the Europa League instead of obviously the trapdoor, and that's Nice and Montpellier, who are only separated by a point. Nice currently occupying that 6th spot that if PSG were to win the Coupe de France, they would obviously enter the Europa League, and Montpellier just below them. It's been an interesting couple of weeks for both sides, really. I mean, we mentioned that Nice, to start off with, sort of came from nowhere in the second half of the season. They had an awful start to the season. They didn't have the greatest of Februaries, but at the same time, they've slowly clawed their way back into contention. But at the same time, in the last couple of weeks, it's been 2 draws against Rennes and Angers, and they're slowly sort of. Again, it's a weird moment where quite a few teams are still bustled in there. You could even argue, maybe even up to Dijon on 42 points, that they're not a million miles away with 5 games still left to play. But at the same time, Nice are a side that have the quality really to put teams away. But they are to miss Mario Balotelli. He's out with injury for this game against the Montpellier side that are very, very stubborn at giving away goals. But at the same time, Nice have a man in Alassane Player, who scored 8 goals in the last 5 games. He's in terrific form at the moment. He's the key man in this one, isn't he?
Absolutely, yeah. As we mentioned on previously, he's kind of the player that kind of sneaks under the radar. But if you don't watch Ligue that much, he's really great sort of character to keep an eye on, and the way he goes about his business. And I think that the injuries here as well is a bit of an issue for Nice with Balotelli and Cyprian have been injured in the last two games. I imagine Cyprian will probably be back this week, but you're absolutely right. They do, if they can keep all their players fit, have the quality, and players are a huge part of that. Some fantastic performances in recent games, and Balotelli being out injured is almost sort of a blessing. Perhaps he's been fantastic this year, and it'll be a shame to see him go if he does go in the summer. But it's almost a blessing in disguise because player doesn't always perform as well with Balotelli in the team, and you give him a little bit more responsibility. He plays through the middle on his own, and when he's in form, he can be really prolific, as we've seen on a number of occasions this season when he's managed to find his form. So that could be huge for Nice going into this game, knowing that all right, Balotelli's out, but we've got Alassane Player in top form. Alain Saint-Maxime as well is another player that I think has been fantastic this season, and I actually caught up with the game that he played against Angers this morning, and he was very lively in that encounter as well. So it's so close. It's brilliant. All right, PSG are so far ahead at the top with 17 points clear, but you when you've got sort of 5 teams between 2 points for 2 Europa League places, the race to seconds back on as well after Monaco last week, 4 points there, and at the bottom as well, it's extremely close. It's going to be extremely exciting end to the season, and I think Nice are going to be a huge part of that. And I think they're probably favourites to finish fifth. They're the better side out of those 5 teams. They've got the experience, and they've got arguably the best manager as well. But it's going to be extremely close. But you're absolutely right. I think they've got the quality to put teams away, and for them, from their point of view, hopefully that'll tell in the last 5 games.
Yeah, they certainly, out of all those teams out there, have the best squad, the best resources really to push that out. And in all honesty, Montpellier at the start of the season are a team that we wouldn't have predicted have been out there, but they've had a really terrific season, really, and a good solid second half of the season. Obviously, it was a bit disappointing for them, really, to lose 3-1 to a Bordeaux side that were sort of on the slide, having given a great 0-0 draw and a great account of themselves at the Stade Velodrome the week beforehand, at least. It's an interesting one. Still, they've obviously got a great defence, Adam, but they also can't really score enough goals for themselves. 32 so far this season. It's the exact same as it's the same kind of issue for a lot of teams is scoring goals in Ligue 1. But at this stage of the season, with the games they've got left as well, they've got Troyes, they've got Rennes, Nantes, Saint-Etienne, they're all games against, except from obviously the one against Troyes, against teams around them, especially games they need to win if they want to make Europa League spot. But have they got the goal scoring prowess to do that? Can they lean on that defense to get that kind of position high up in the table? Or do you think that some of the teams that they are facing, including Nice, or in fact especially Nice, might just have enough for them to stop them achieving that goal?
It's a very interesting question because it will determine whether Montpellier finish in the top 6 or not. And playing against teams that they're in direct competition with, as you mentioned, like Montpellier, like Nice, like Saint-Etienne, like Nantes, like Rennes, 4 of their last 5 games, that almost suits them the way that they play, because given how tight that race is, anything, a point in some of the games is probably pretty acceptable, and a win would be huge in any of these really tight races. A win's pretty massive, and the way Montpellier play. They can sit in, they hit teams on the counter attack. Fantastic. They're extremely solid when they do that. And the fact that, 3 of those games are away from home, Nice, Nantes, Rennes, is also a bit of a blessing in disguise in that they won't be the team that's, the onus on to attack. They can sit back and defend. Last week, you really saw their limitations when they played Bordeaux. I really felt like, and the limitations of De Zakarian as well. A very astute coach, very defensively sound, but he hasn't ever shown really that he knows how to sort of cultivate an attacking outlook from his players, and they were really lackluster last week. And they felt like they conceded an early goal as well, and they had to be on the front foot then, and just had no ideas whatsoever. They've really struggled to break what is a pretty average Bordeaux team down, and who've really fallen off that new manager bounce since Gustavo Poyet took over. And I expected them to get into that game, and they really came nowhere near it. So. If the final 5 games were against bottom third, bottom half teams, and they're at home, and you expect them to win, I wouldn't fancy them at all. But this kind of plays into Montpellier's hands a little bit in the final few games, and it just remains to be seen whether they can maintain that form going into those games. And you wouldn't bet against them.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Maybe that defensive thing will either go one way or the other, won't it? It'll either be enough because they're facing teams around them that their defensive base gives them enough to try and nick games 1-0. But at the same time, if they can't achieve that and they allow teams to score goals, they don't have the firepower to get back in games, and that's maybe at the higher end of the table the difficulty really. If they were maybe fighting near the bottom, that's exactly the kind of thing they want to be getting because they can nick points from that. But at the same time, if you're fighting to try and get wins, it might not really be enough for them to get over the line. They've had a terrific season. They've got some great players. It's great to see players like Giovanni Sio get a sort of second lease of life at Montpellier. I think Scurry's had a great season. We've mentioned Roussillon a number of times. He'll get a big move. And Mukiele's made great strides and will be a big player for the future for them and possibly a real saleable asset in a year or so. Hilton, the titan that the 40-year-old really is, it's going to be a shame that it feels like that he's maybe got one more season in him, which would be nice, but he's got to be getting to his legs now at some point. I feel very sorry for him. At least I don't think I could be running around, even if I'm 25. I can't imagine trying to run around as much as he seems to be able to, at least anyway. What do you think the score will be in this one, and then Adam?
I'm gonna sort of back Montpellier and go 0-0.
Yeah,
I do the usual thing. Yeah,
I think it might just be that case of Montpellier trying to play a bit defensively in the second half. Someone like Player just gets a little bit of breathing space and scores a goal, and then that maybe sinks Montpellier, especially with them playing away from home. So I'm going for a 1-0 win for Nice, and Montpellier maybe. Just this, it's been an excellent season for them. They'll be delighted that they were nowhere near the bottom more than anything. It sort of maybe just peters out into non-European football, which in fact will probably be better for them next season, really, more than anything. That's all that we have for this week. My thanks to Adam and all of you listening at home. Excuse me. Do join us for the main show on Monday. But for now, enjoy your weekend of football.